Well, that's gonna mess us up.
I mean, that's weird. Okay, good morning, everyone. We're recording, and this is the June 11th, 2024 meeting of the PZC Design Review Panel. Because this is kind of an informal meeting, I generally sort of act as the chair, but in the future, if someone wants to volunteer to do that, I'm happy to turn that over to folks. So any volunteers for today? All right, I'll go ahead and do that. So the minutes, I did not include your minutes. The minutes we had were from like October, I think, from the hub. So we'll do that next time, I guess. Because I think most of you know each other, but we do have a new member, Matt Barley. Maybe I think it's Matt, if you just want to, maybe we should just all go around and reintroduce each other, since we haven't met since October.
I get to go first. Great. So I'm an architect, self-employed. I live on Hillendale, if anyone knows where that is. And I have a little studio here. My background has really been primarily high-end custom residential, a little bit of multifamily, and I'm focusing on hospitality and retail right now. My career started in Boston, working for kind of mid-sized firms primarily, and also focusing around historic preservation while in some of the neighborhoods in Boston. So a pretty diverse, I think. I like to remind myself that specializing is important, but a pretty diverse background. Each firm that I've kind of learned this craft from has had their own focus and kind of taken on those components. But really, I think for us right now, we're 3 people big. So the hospitality and retail market seems like a great place for us to really work with business owners and be able to provide them with what a small firm can provide, I guess. So that's me. I'll pass the torch.
Want to go, Kathy? I'm just going on my Zoom.
Sure. Hi, Kathy Dorgan, a similarly small Mansfield-based firm. We work in primarily affordable housing and community planning in under-resourced areas. We talk about participatory design for communities of choice and equity. And my latest project is right around the corner on South Eagleville Road. So glad to be working in the community. Thank you.
So Yan?
Hello, my name is Huihyun Park. I'm a faculty at Plant Science and Landscape Architecture Department here at UConn. This is my 6th year. Thanks to many colleagues who have been providing me with support, I was lucky to be promoted with tenure this coming fall. So excited about that. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I teach community planning. It's great to hear that you are working on a community planning project, Kathy. So that is really community engaged service learning kind of project. And I also teach planting design, and I used to teach writing class focused on environmental planning, but another adjunct actually took it over. Instead, I'm teaching Gen Ed class, which is offering to non-LA majors and LA majors. It's just vernacular landscapes and general in education about the landscapes as a whole. My background is in biology and landscape architecture. And my PhD is about environmental design and planning from Arizona State University. So pretty interdisciplinary. Yeah, happy to be here. I don't have my own farm. I wish someday, but I'm really happy to work with a student. So that's me.
And last but not least, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm originally from Iowa, Midwestern boy, went to Iowa State. Well, played a year of college football for Missouri. Ended up at Cooper Union in New York City. Built this skyscraper on 52nd Street for my old professor and colleague Raymond Abraham. And then came up here, was teaching at UConn in the School of Fine Arts, worked on the NEA competition back in the day. And now I go to RISD City College in New York City and Columbia for reviews quite often. And I've been with Taisu Kim here for, well, it's going on 20 years now. I thought maybe 2 years maximum, but I guess it's 20 now. So I'm basically a jack of all trades. I do everything. I do have a small farm spread in Mansfield Center that I've been restoring since we bought the house. I got a 3,000 square foot fabrication shop, MIG welders. I enjoy working with steel, wood, and everything. So I basically gutted the house and renovated the whole thing. So yeah, so that's me basically. Right now I'm working on the Prosser Library. I just finished the Mansfield's new net zero school in town. So that one came out pretty good. So a lot of work with the environment, with the projects, and make sure the sustainability is embodied with anything we touch in the world. So that's where I'm coming from.
Great. I think you all know me, but I am coming up on my second year as Director of Planning and Development for Mansfield. And before that, I did several jobs with the town. I started out managing the town's open space and parks and preserves and doing a lot of acquisition. Then I became the inland wetlands agent and started working on our plan of conservation and development, Mansfield Tomorrow, and then sort of have evolved. And I've been doing this for 2 years, and it's been a busy 2 years in Mansfield, as you all know. So I think I wrote your charts just to be reminded of that. I think it's always good on the agenda. An advisory group appointed by the Planning and Zoning Commission to provide application review assistance. The panel shall include at least 3 and not more than 5 people competent in such fields as architecture, landscape architecture, business, engineering, and art. And I think we have a very well-qualified panel before us, which is great. So I wanted to just, as you know, most of you know, we've had over 1,206 or about 1,261 units of multifamily housing approved in Mansfield over really since 2020, and the majority of that was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission really this past summer and fall. So the Planning and Zoning Commission took a pause and they decided to do a moratorium on all multifamily housing and to kind of revamp the regulations to kind of decide what the community wanted. So I have a presentation because I think this has helped me to kind of remind me of how we got here and so I'm going to be kind of doing a road show with this to the public, but let me just share my screen here. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
No, here we go. All right. Now you should be able to see it, I hope.
Mhm.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be, you are the the second committee that I've given this to. I'm going to be presenting this to a bunch of boards and committees tomorrow night, and then I'm going to have a virtual Q&A for the public on Thursday night. So just to go over the recently approved developments in Mansfield, we've got Eagleville Green, which Kathy's been working on. That's 42 units with a density of 12.7 acres per developable area. The standard 392 units, 25.9 units per acre, 497 Middle Turnpike, or the golf course project, 261 units or 8.6 units per acre. The Villages at Four Corners, 116 units, 8.6 units per acre. And the Hub at Mansfield, which is 1,165 bedrooms or 411.7 bedrooms per acre. I've talked about this as 1,261 units, but really I think we need to look at this as 811 units of multifamily and then a group dwelling, which is the Hub. we have gotten some affordable units, 91 affordable. So there's my typo. It's 34 low income, which is really from the Eagleville Green project. And we do have 36 workforce units that were approved as part of these applications. Workforce is 120% of area median income. Affordable is at 80% of area median income, and then low income, the 34 are at 60% area median income. And as a result of this, we have almost $5 million in our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So these are all good things. So when we were approving these, you know, this has been a long time coming. We know that there was water and sewer that came to Mansfield. Connecticut Water put in a big pipeline from the Schnipsit Reservoir after a big environmental impact evaluation. The town bonded for sewer. We got we bonded a third. We got money from the state for a third, and then a third of that is from sewer assessments. So we knew we were going to get increased density. So in 2015, we had design concepts, and these are some of them. You know, locating the parking to the side and rear of buildings. We wanted multiple buildings incorporated. There were a big parking garage, we wanted them wrapped. We wanted to really highlight the green space, have a focal point of a central green. We want our environmental infrastructure to be as a site amenity, not an afterthought, and incorporating natural features into design amenities. And this is what we got. So, you know, we got the standard, as I said, the density is over on the left-hand side of the slide. It's in the Plan Business 3 zone. The existing zoning regulations permit 15 units per acre. But this development had some density bonuses. So they got density bonuses for their structured parking and sustainability. They were allowed 8 units per acre and up to 15 bedrooms, and they took advantage of all of those density bonuses. They have on-site affordable units, but they have an additional 2.9 units per acre, and they got that by paying a 1.7 million fee in lieu. 35 on-site affordable, 17 workforce. You have the hub at Mansfield, and I just talked about this as being our group dwelling. This is on King Hill Road, on either side of North Eagleville, 2 sides of the street on North Eagleville Road and then King Hill Road. Our most dense development in Mansfield, and when the Planning and Zoning Commission was doing the zoning for this area, they felt that density belonged here, you know, right on the edge of campus. And so that's what they got. So again, this is the hub. It's broken down into 2 sites on both sides of the road, and they have no on-site affordable units. The Planning and Zoning Commission approved a 3.3 million payment in lieu. And this, we don't have that yet. That will be collected when the zoning permit is filed. Then we have 497 Middle Turnpike, or the golf course. So the density here is 8.6 units per acre, but all of the units are clustered on the southerly 15 acres, and they do have 22 acres of permanently preserved open space, and we will get that when upon certificate of zoning compliance. So you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, this, you know, they do have a lot of green space. This little shape here is actually town-owned open space. So this right here, this gray area is what will be deeded to the town in a conservation easement, and there will be trails and public access as part of this conservation easement, but they will own that property. Then we have the Eagleville Green project. This is a special zoning district. They came in as 830G, and then the Planning Zoning Commission created this special zone for them called the South Eagleville Road Housing Opportunity Zone. Are you all 830G is the it's the Affordable Housing Appeals Act. So basically, if you do not have 10% of your units as affordable, an applicant can come in and kind of override local zoning under an 830G. And so this is sort of what happened here, but I think we're all, I think this is a good project and it came out now nicely. So again, we have the area there's a central green, or it's going to be a stormwater detention basin, but it's going to be sort of a highlight of the property. It's going to be a dry basin, right, Kathy?
Yes,
Yeah. So, and it's
we're calling it a rain garden.
a rain garden, a big rain garden. So, yeah. Again, there will be 8 market rate units, but then 34 low income units. And then the Villages at Four Corners, that is immediately adjacent, or I think it's south or heading more towards Yukon of the standard. That's 15 units per acre. There will be a sidewalk along the full frontage from the standard to all the way to Four Corners. The pedestrian connection will be through a wooded area. So we worked with both the standard and the Villages to put a wetland. They needed a wetland crossing for that sidewalk, and so they went into the interior and are crossing the wetlands with a bridge on a more narrow portion of that site, or the wetland rather. So again, this is the Villages. So as I said before, we did all this in my first year on the job, and we the Planning and Zoning Commission decided, let's have a moratorium, let's take a pause and really kind of understand what the community wants in terms of high density housing. The moratorium ends on August 31st. Per statute, it has to be a temporary and limited moratorium. We can't have a moratorium forever. The commission could extend it, but I don't know that there's a lot of appetite from them to do that at this point. So many of you attended the workshop that we had in January that was held by or facilitated by Tyche Planning and Policy Group. There are consultants that have been working with staff and the commission on these regulations. I did include a summary of the feedback on that session in your packet, and hopefully you had a chance to review it. If not, take some time to do it. But I think we heard loud and clear that we've had a lot of development very quickly. I think it's going to be, I think most people felt that it was in the right location. If we were going to have development, they felt that it belonged, on these arterial roads or collector roads, close to public transportation, where there was public infrastructure. I think some of the design features we heard were, people wanted to see us improve on that. I think the form of the housing, many of the developers that have come in specialize in student housing. So while per fair housing, they can't just rent to housing, the student housing developers own these properties. So most likely they will be marketed towards students, especially the hub. And then I would imagine the standard too. It'll be interesting to see what happens with 497 Middle Turnpike, the golf course property, and the standard as well. I'm sorry, the Villages, the one that we don't have zoning, or we're in the process of completing the zoning permit for now. So that brings us to this new type of regulation that Tyche and the Planning and Zoning Commission are seeking feedback on. It's a different type of regulation than we've done before. So it's called the Planned Housing Design District. If any of you are familiar with village design districts, they're allowed, that's really the only way a planning and zoning commission can thoroughly regulate aesthetics. We have a lot of things we can do through the special permit process, but it's very hard unless you have a village design district to regulate aesthetics. So this planned housing district is an attempt to allow us to do that. It's going to apply to developments with more than 6 units. And the way it's going to work is, if approved, there'll be a pre-application, a staff review, and that's going to be just, staff will work with them, help them to understand the town by reviewing the plan of conservation and development with them. That will be a publicly vetted document. We have our 2015 plan of conservation and development. We have an RFQ on the street to develop our 2025 plan of conservation development. We've been doing the Northwest Mansfield Vision and Strategy Plan. So we have a lot of planning documents that we're going to be showing to these developers, educating them about our town and what the public has wanted. Then there'll be a conceptual development review process. That's going to be optional. That's going to, we're strongly recommending that these developers go before the Planning and Zoning Commission and really get an understanding of what the Planning and Zoning Commission, are they on the right track? Then they would come in with a master development plan along with a zone change application. So this will be a floating zone. They will have to come in with this master plan, and then at the same time, they would have a zone change application. And at that point is when you are hearing from the public through a public hearing process. If that goes through, the commission would, land that planned housing design district. And then the applicant would come in with a site plan application, and there would be no public hearing. So the thought is that the developer is required to kind of learn about our town. I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between a zone change and a special permit application and what kind of authority the Planning and Zoning Commission has during these different processes. The thought is that a developer can come in, not expend a ton of resources doing their design, but kind of get a feel for what the commission wants, develop this master plan, land the zone, then do all the heavy lifting with the engineering. If that development meets, is what the master plan has defined, then they come in with their site plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission make sure that they're compliant with everything that's been in their master plan. There isn't a public hearing. That would just get approved, and the commission would decide, and then the development is approved rather. So it requires a lot of front loading on the developer and the Planning and Zoning Commission to review this. So again, this will be applicable for more than 6 units. We've defined specific housing types: single family detached, duplex, multiplex, and apartment. In terms of the siting criteria, we have the minimum district size, the housing types that would be allowed, the maximum density, and then the location criteria. So the South Eagleville Road Housing Opportunities Zone, that is where Eagleville Green is. That's really around like Wrights Village, sort of that area on the corner of 275 and Maple Road. The planned business districts, I'm going to show you our zoning map, but if you think of the planned business districts, you start down at the Eastbrook Mall, that's PB1, you head up to Stores Center, the two properties that are not encompassed in the Stores Center Design District, that would be what we call the Haydes property, where Bagel Zone and Oriental Cafe and Aladdin's is, and then the Starbucks building, those are in the PB2 zone. And then PB3 is Four Corners, PB4 is King Hill Road, and PB5 is Perkins Corner. So in those locations, we're saying a maximum density of 15 units per developable acre. And that can only front on an arterial or collector road. In the PVRA, and I'll show you that in a minute, that's you need 5 acres. You can get just single family or a detached duplex. You can get 8 units per acre. And again, it would have to be an arterial collector road. The PVRA is in southern Mansfield. It is within our agricultural area of Mansfield. It's a special, it contains basically 2 properties. The Planning and Zoning Commission created the PVRA zone, probably, I don't know, 15 years ago. And it was an attempt to kind of thread the needle because there are a lot of prime ag soils there, but there's also public water and sewer. So that's why they decided to allow for some higher density housing there. And then this planned housing design district can be applied to any other zone. If you have 5 acres, if you're on an arterial or collector road, and there's different, you could do a single family detached duplex or a multiplex, as long as you're designated on the future land use map as compact residential. So arterial streets, collector streets, I'm sure you all are probably more familiar than the average person, but arterial streets are what you would think of. They're mainly the state roads, north and south frontage road, basically, and then North Eagleville Road would be the only non-state roads. Collector streets would be, just what it sounds like, streets that collect a lot of traffic. The larger streets, and they're listed there. So this is our zoning map. I kind of explained to you where the darker areas are generally where are areas that are zoned for higher density or business commercial. The area in like that purpley blue, those are our flood hazard zones, and those are very limited as to what you can do. But PVRA is down in here, and then I'm sure you're familiar with the planned business. And then the rest of the town is really part of our rural areas. The way we calculate developable area is you have to take your total site acreage, areas with wetlands, steep slopes, other restrictions, you subtract that out, and that's where you get your total developable area. So when they're coming in with their master plan, they have to look at several design considerations, site design and orientation, neighborhood connections, parking, open space, landscape design, building design, facade. We're talking about transparency, no more, buildings without any one whole, an entire side with no windows, like you have seen maybe on some of the new builds, like on Hunting Lodge Road. We don't allow that in multifamily. We're not getting any of that. They have to look at their solid waste disposal, bicycle parking. So when they're coming in with their master plan, as I said, they're coming in for a zone change. And when you do a zone change, the Planning and Zoning Commission is acting in its legislative capacity. And this is the time where the Planning and Zoning Commission has the broadest discretion. Really, it just has to be consistent. It absolutely has to be consistent with the POCD. They can just say that this zone is not appropriate for this area, and rarely is a PZC decision for a zone change overturned in court. When you get to the site plan approval, that's under a separate section of the Connecticut general statutes. That's when the Planning and Zoning Commission is acting in its administrative capacity. So if you have that regulation, if it complies with the regulation, then they get the permit. So when they're doing that site plan approval, they're going to be acting in a different way, and they don't have as much discretion. Previously multifamily was approved by special permit. That is also when the Planning and Zoning Commission is acting in its administrative capacity. And it allows the use, you have to allow the use in a manner that's permitted within the regulation. It runs with the land. With a special permit, you have a little bit more flexibility, but and not as much as a site plan approval, but definitely you do not have the legislative discretion that you do with a zone change. You can impose conditions, but they have to be clearly related to protecting public health, safety, convenience, and property values. And there is a public hearing required when you do a special permit. If these are approved and they come in with their site plan, the site plan will be reviewed for many things. And I've listed those: waste disposal, water supply, stormwater, parking, all of the things that applications get reviewed for. The other regulations will still apply. They're still going to have to meet affordable housing. We heard and the Affordable Housing Committee and the Planning and Zoning Commission, they weren't happy with the fee in lieu. It's very difficult to calculate a fee in lieu that makes sense. It's expensive to build housing on site, and they felt that the fee in lieu that was given to the town, as stated in the regulations, really wasn't adequate. So they decided, for now, let's just get rid of the fee in lieu. In the Pleasant Valley Residence Agriculture Zone, PZC can still require up to 35% of the prime ag acreage to be preserved. So that stays from the existing regulations. You still have to meet all the performance standards: stormwater, noise, erosion, sedimentation control, parking, lighting, traffic, landscaping, and they still have to meet the architectural and design standards. So we're almost done here, but in order to enact the proposed regulations, we have to repeal certain sections related to multifamily. So we've decided to do this in 2 separate applications. And so they're going to be removing the design multiple residence zone altogether. That zone will really, the PHDD will it will be the same as, it will be applied to the DMR. So obviously we have to remove the dimensional requirements from the DMR. Our section where we regulate multifamily and group dwellings, that's going to be removed in its entirety. Affordable housing requirements, we're making a modification to the introductory provisions because they're kind of out of date. We're removing the fee in lieu altogether. And the bulk and density requirements in the Pleasant Valley Residence Agriculture zone, we have to remove those because that PHDD will be applied there.
Jennifer, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so relative to what you just presented, so will there remain districts that have a higher density than this design district when you've made all those changes? I'm sorry, I'm just not familiar enough with the zoning regulations to follow.
No. A store center design district will remain, but there will be no other there will be no other higher density. So
there'll be nowhere in Mansfield that you can build more than 15 units per acre unless you're coming in as an 830G.
Right.
Is that except for the and this center district is pretty much built out, right?
Right. There are a few parcels that can apply to be added to that, like the Haydes and Starbucks building. Those can apply to be added to but that's definitely a process. But I would think that if they get redeveloped, they most likely will request to be added to the store center design district.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you go back and you look at, I can go back and show you the densities that we were getting before.
Yeah, no, I again, this is a great presentation, by the way.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Trying to make this can be hard stuff to kind of digest. But yeah, so these were the densities that we were getting before. So I think we're right within that, the densities that we've had, and we did hear that people felt it was a little too dense. So, you know, it's going to be interesting once construction sites, as you all know very well, are really messy and they're not pretty. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, you know, when the standard gets built. I mean, that's what people are seeing, and Eagleville Green too. And, you know, it's a big change, but I think once it's all built, we'll just see what the community thinks about that after that. So do you have any questions about this? And I think from your perspective, I'd like to see if you have any comments on the design considerations. And then at some other point, if you all want to take a dive into the architectural design standards at a future date, we certainly could look at changing, you know, making changing the regulations, changing those design standards. But I'd love your feedback.
I, of course, have lots of feedback, as I always do.
Well, this is
But
good. I really love to have those, when I was reviewing those applications,
yeah,
it was great to have you, all of you there. I got a lot out of your feedback, and I did, you know, this process, I think will, in the master plan development process, you're going to receive these applications earlier. I think, you know, it was hard because the zoning was already in place when we approved these other developments. And so you could only just kind of give really high level comments that were, it was on the cookie was already baked.
Yeah.
You know?
we agree with that. But maybe other people want to start in.
I'm going to stop sharing so that I can.
Well, the only thing I'd comment on is that I would agree with all the comments on that PDF package that you sent to everybody. I think there is, you know, I mean, generally, as far as the architectural, you know, appearance and connections and even spacing between these things, that sometimes it's hard to take, you know. And I've always wondered, you know, our comments, how we can actually make an effect in a positive way that keeps sort of the more modern architects out there interested in doing something innovative and maybe new, and think of different ways of what sustainability looks like in terms of natural materials and I hate that word context, but, you know, sort of fitting in, you know. Part of the reason why I got this old house I'm restoring is I firmly believe, as a modern architect, that for me, giving back, because for me, it's like an old person, you know, so I got to take care of it. And it's got some spirits in the site, and the history of it. So even though outside is historic, inside's like a Tribeca loft, because I'm a modernist and I love, you know, empty, open plans and a lot of natural light. So I would hope that there would be some way to get that in that architectural review that would allow some serious direction in those areas. Because sometimes if you're too strict, then you sort of, those kinds of architects won't be interested, right? Because it's like they just want a Walt Disney, Florida sort of new urbanism, not to, you know, put that down, but after a while it just becomes like Disneyland, right? And I think that each community has its own history, its own sort of voice. And I think that a lot of the great architects and other people in that business of putting things in the world that affect the spirit in some way, that a lot of these things that are built, you know, even I'm shocked when I drive by 44 and I see what's happening. And we reviewed those things a long time ago. I'm like, my God, these things are just packed in there like sardines. And you got the developers taking advantage of all these loopholes and everything like that. I just wonder if, and for me as an architect, I do it naturally. You know, I start with the wetlands, I start with the history, I start with all that. And then I allow the building to come out of that, and not forcing as many units as I can get on the site and challenging and finding loopholes. So for me, it's a whole different mentality that I'm having a hard time addressing. So, but I read through all the comments, and I think I would agree with Kathy. Jennifer, this is fantastic. I think it's about time. And, if I can help with some of that other stuff, I'd be more than willing to. So, but understandably, I can throw a lot of things at it, but at the same time, I have to back out and just allow the space for these developers to want to sort of build in our community too. So, that's basically all I have for now, till anybody else wants to say something.
So I made a lot of detailed comments because I didn't realize we might have another chance. So if other people want to say something quick, and I don't want to keep us too long with my drivel.
Yeah, I'll jump in right here. Yeah, I agree, Jennifer. It was great to understand. I mean, it was a little bit challenging for me to understand and interpret the text materials, but this is much understandable. So I appreciate that. I think it's a well, I agree. Maybe if we can have another time, like you suggested, really focus on the architecture and design standards. That would be really nice, because I think we are going through, the times that we have a lot of challenges, not only for the Mansfield as a town, but also, at the broader level. People are thinking about sustainable, and I see that a lot of public perceptions around climate change and sustainability and all those natural resources. I mean, they are actually feeling and sensitizing all those challenges that we all feel. And so I think we can make a kind of model case, even though we are talking about high density, in our term, but then there is a lot of opportunity. I think this is a really great opportunity for us to think through what could be achieved through this opportunity, so that I don't know, you are gonna take our opinions as a recommendation or suggestions. I don't know how much it can be actually incorporated into the real text of the regulation, but I think we can include more sustainability languages, and also some existing sustainability related rating systems. There's LEED and sites that are some verbiages that we can actually leverage over, and then even more, I don't know, people may think this is a little bit radical, or I don't know, maybe proactive, but I have some comments from the existing firms in planning / landscape architecture industry that they really like to see more languages about landscapes. I'm here to represent the landscape arena, so bear with me if that's not really common language that you are taught every day. But for example, the pollinators, right? And then some native plants. I saw that there is a native plant language over there. It was kind of surprising that it was not suggested or encouraged, but you should use the native plants. So that was a language in the current form. But then you can go a little bit further. You may think about maybe encourage considering native plants that can attract pollinators or urban wildlife, urban bees. I know there are some kind of contrasting or controversial kind of conversations about the urban wildlife, but again, as a landscape architect with the ecology background, I think it's a really nice opportunity. You can actually do a little bit more kind of ecological consideration into the architectural design as well. And the people will love it, because they'll ultimately will have a lot of people, possibly the students, right? So we are going to have a lot of future citizens who can have more stewards in their own neighborhood that can be expanded further to the broader region. So I'm going to stop here. And then if I have more comments, I can share later on as well.
I would love that. So first of all, Sian, I always love a landscape architecture perspective, because that's sort of where my lens too. But when you look at these developments, it's the design, but it's also the landscaping that softens it. You look at the new dorm that's being developed on campus. I'm just hoping that the landscaping will soften that, because usually that's how it rolls. But for this, I know Matt is going to have some stuff to say, but for these design considerations, I think so. There's two levels here. Right now we're looking at this specific regulation, and these design considerations are what is before you and will have the opportunity to be modified and then adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So these are the design considerations that will go into the master plan, and they're considerations, right? Then when they're doing their site plan, they're going to have to meet those architectural design standards that are in section 19077 that I included, I believe, in your packet. But today, and for this round of regulations, we need to really focus on these considerations. Then we can have another meeting and make changes to 19077 to make sure that those, all of the belt and suspenders are there for that. So that if we could kind of make some comments on these areas, I'd be really grateful.
Well, I'll jump in generally. I know that after doing this net zero school in town, and anything we're touching, at least in our office, and I know architects all over the world are more and more sensitive to this. I wish we could write in here that everything has to be net zero, or at least equivalent of a LEED silver. I know the state mandates for all the schools that we do that it has to meet a minimum for any reimbursement, a LEED silver. You don't have to go for the LEED itself to get the plaque, but they wrote their own protocol for that for grant purposes for districts. So that ship is moving fast and furious. So I think, implementing something like that into this would be helpful, so that you wouldn't get maximizing units and then thinking about the landscape or sustainability second, but you start there first and then allow the maximizing of the units to come out of that. I think that could have an effect as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can require that as a private developer. I wish we could, right? I mean, the state can allow that, and with public funding, you can allow that, or you can require that. But I'll check with our attorney to see if, that I certainly would like to do that, and I know we've looked at that in the past.
I just wonder if there's any language we can put in there that might hint to that desire, because I know that when we looked at writing ed specs for different districts, including Mansfield, when we helped them do the EDO 49, everything, that was something they definitely wanted very clearly, and we helped them shape that language, that it was to be net zero, and it was to be a learning environment about that. So everything design wise, planning, programming, everything came out of that. So it couldn't be anything else in the end, which I thought was great. So you set the stage, and then things fall into place.
And maybe it's one of the design considerations could be sustainability measures. I think a lot of sustainability measures are already incorporated into these considerations, but maybe it needs to be more explicit.
I think you're right that you can't mandate it, but I think you can offer bonuses for it. So
that's what we took away. We took out all density.
I understand.
People didn't like that. So with the discretionary, with the zone change and that great discretion, you can explain that that's what you want in terms of your design consideration, but you're only going to get these maximums. You're not going to get.
Well, this goes back to the sort of what the character and the shape of the community wants, right?
Yep.
The educational community wanted that, and that was top of the list. So I guess at a certain point there has to be, when there's a desire, a need, that has to happen first. So I guess if that's a high priority in the town, that should be, excuse me, that language should be in there somehow, some way. Yeah. If it is a high priority, which I would hope that it would be.
Yeah, and I would hope we're still commenting on some of these, people comment based on what they've seen or understood, but you only see what you see, you don't see what you didn't get. So I think it's worth thinking about. So first of all, I think this is a great initiative. I really like targeting the roads with more traffic for the density, or whatever. I don't think any of this is high density. In my work, high density is over 100 units per acre. I think it's, compact at most, and I think it's disingenuous to call it high density. I do still think, and I know this isn't what other people think, but it's what I think, that there is a need for higher density in the areas, and maybe that's moderate density, like the hub. I mean, it's great to have all those units there. All of the bakeries and other things people would like to see need some intense development to that. Plus, it preserves other development sites by putting the housing in other areas. And again, I understand people don't necessarily see that, but it's what I think. But I think generally this format is really good. However, I do think that the specific design guidelines really limit creative choices. I agree. And there is a tone of it looking for traditional design to be the only solution, which I don't think is true. I think what Jeff has said is really true. And I think that there's a lack of the green space serving the needs of the residents, so that, there really needs to be green space that people can use on site, that's either, individual to their units or is shared. And I think what we saw in the projects that we looked at is too much of the green space was not accessible. It was in bad locations. It didn't have light. So I think those are the two things. I did go through and make a whole bunch of specific comments, which I can list now, just to get people thinking about this. So in the single family detached, there's a limit here of 1,500 square foot in size. I don't see any reason to limit that. If you can do compact development and get larger units that people want, why wouldn't we do that? I think 8 is a good minimum for development, but again, we might look at, there's some great examples of fabulous design at higher densities than we're showing here at a good modern density. A lot of the specific rules, like having the doorways on the road, facing the road, that makes sense on a small site, but like on Eagleville Green, where we have roads going in to the site and entrances beyond that, we couldn't do the townhouse solution with this regulation. We would have had to do an apartment building. And so, it's important to think about that and many other things about how it does, affect the, I think there's a lot of creative design that things like that. And other structuring of this. It's like tall buildings at the back of the site. That may make sense in some places, but the back of the site might be up against a small residential neighborhood. Might make much more sense to have the tall buildings at the front of the site on the road instead of adjacent. So I think that envisions one circumstance, but not all of the sites we do. And I think that really should be limited when you're working on a smaller, adjacent to a smaller scale building already there. Same with the graduated setbacks, very limited application. Again, somebody's thinking of one solution, but they're not, as Jeff mentioned, really looking at giving creativity to get. We don't want to just eliminate bad architecture. We want to allow good architecture.
That's great. I love like specifics on how to do that, because it's hard to regulate.
It's hard. It is really hard.
If we can do it, let's do it. This is the time to do it and provide that guidance. If there's, specific edits that we
Yeah.
need to make in terms of what people should be considering, I wanna.
Yeah.
Well,
I
you know,
don't-
we could brainstorm a little, we could go off on our own things and then come back and we can all brainstorm about that. I'm sure Matt, Kathy, Sonu, myself, we
Yeah.
all have comments on what that shaping could be. I'm sure we all have different
Yeah.
detailed viewpoints of that. So
Yeah, and it'll be different and things like that. I'll just go through some more that I saw
okay,
to be helpful. C5 requires a minimum parking of 1. I think, if we want to really make transportation work, and if things are on the bus lines or they're walkable distance to university, I don't see why they need parking. It does, if we're not adjacent to other parking, I don't see. In D5, it calls D4, I'm sorry, it calls for small scale fencing around green spaces. I think, again, that's limiting. It could be stone walls, it could be shrubbery, it could be other things. I don't see a reason to limit it to fencing. So that's a thing to think about. F, building design. It requires for mixed roof lines, dormers, gables, or similar variations instead of flat roofs. Again, there's great architecture with flat roofs. And I think a complexity of design or something, instead of, focusing on gable roofs. And gable roofs on big buildings, as we've seen, and don't always work well at all.
think of the business school at UConn. My God.
Yes, there you go. And again, I think we need to look at some of the quality design that's out there for alternatives. I think the limited visual images that were provided only look at one approach. And I think that's the same with our design regulations. All the images are traditional design, and they need to be changed out with, other more variety of design. Again, I do traditional design sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the only solution. There's also the requirement that one bathroom have a bathtub for accessible units. That can be real problematic, and not, what we generally do.
Right, that came from, so we used to have this multi-generational housing provision in our multi-family
Yeah.
rights, so that we were designing units, or developers were forced to design units that might be attractive to someone other than a student. We like students, but we need to attract, we need multi-generational housing types.
No, and I agree with that. I mean,
But
I agree with
that's
the-
a really good point. Yeah,
I agree with the goal. I don't think that this does it. I think 25 units is way too low a unit to have a traffic study, and I think 100 units is way too low to require a fiscal study. I think those are good provisions. I just think those numbers need to be much higher.
I'm gonna have to take my dog out quick. He has to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay. Oh, and I'll add, so this is it, requiring a Mylar seems antiquated to me, of the plans on, I1.
I1.
Is it? Oh, sorry, F1, reading wrong. It requires a certified Mylar of the master plan development.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I would think you'd want electronic copies. But
well, we have to have that filed in the town clerk. That's a requirement. The development plan would have to be filed via a Mylar, but that might be just stated in another part of the,
yeah,
I
I don't
mean,
know. It's just something
yeah,
that,
right. No,
it-
everything is always electronic, but then when you're approving that, they have to file that Mylar in the clerk, and it has to be signed by everyone.
Okay, well, that might be something at some point you'd want to change.
Yeah, that would be probably state statute, but yeah.
Maybe, yeah, or not, because,
Pretty soon we won't have room for all these milers, but yeah.
but there's lots of good, I mean, I'm picking out things I think should change. There's lots of really good things in here. But-
I'm happy to focus on ways to make this better and not, and I'm glad you like the kind of overall, and we can make that as a general comment, but I really would like to get specific comments down for the record.
Great. And I've spoken a lot, Matt, you didn't get a chance to speak up.
No, that's good. Kathy, as part of our conversation yesterday, I enjoy the topics you're bringing up. One thing that, in no particular order, I was just taking some notes down. I would notice that the conceptual development review is not required. And that would be a great opportunity to have suggestions about things like roof shapes and massing. So it seems a bit of a missed opportunity for discussion and implementation and kind of guidance towards kind of showing someone that solution of the building next door is not necessarily the right solution. So if we use the standard as an example of, there's another comment in there about using architectural character that fits the neighborhood. If they're using a building that doesn't necessarily fit as a precedence to then create a new thing, but then there's not a space conceptually to kind of tease that out and make further guidance, it feels like a bit of a misstep for a board like ours to not have that time, especially if it's considered not required. And
Well,
I don't necessarily understand
why
what that step is.
you're not, and we can't require that statutorily. But I'll tell you, when they come to me as a staffer, I will say, you're strongly encouraged to do this, but I believe that we are not allowed, we don't have the authority to require that. But I'm gonna tell them, look, you're gonna be coming in with a master plan. You're gonna be spending a lot of money to develop that master plan, and you're gonna be wanting to get that master plan approved. And if you don't come in for that conceptual design review process or that step, you're missing an opportunity. And I do that all the time. And you can lead a horse to water, but you can't necessarily always make them drink.
Right.
And sometimes we're dealing with developers with, I appreciate they're trying to maximize their revenue. That has come, I mean, we're dealing with these humongous multinational real estate investment trusts. And so that's always what they're going to push for. But this process allows the commission to say, if we don't like it, you're not getting it. And because you're not getting that zone change, because we have legislative discretion. So learn about our community, learn about the neighborhood, figure this out. But that's why these design considerations are so important to get right.
Right. I also wonder, I'm sure there's probably further legal implications, but I just kind of read through each one of the sections and teased out a couple of lawyer words that I think mean a lot. And I think this is exactly what you're saying, Jennifer. So I found the word preferred, strongly encouraged, locate and design, provide, and must include and shall be provided. And I wonder if there's a consistency that needs to be kind of created throughout the whole document that makes sure that it's understood when it's a suggestion. Highly encouraged is a suggestion. It's not a requirement. So I just think making very clear consistency across all of them. And if it's as simple as just narrowing down the legal implication of those required words. Again, I think even Jeff had said it once, was some architects really try to find those loopholes and and have maybe even attorney next to them kind of planning the design through those loopholes.
Yep.
And I think
They-
some of those words, strongly encourage, sounds great, but I'm not required to do it. So why am I going to do it? Right. So I think maybe just kind of tying that together and making sure that's been reviewed by someone who's a bit more legally adept than I am.
all of these have to go to our attorney and he has to, you know, define that they're legally sound, but I agree, that's a very good catch. And I think in zoning, the should, shall, must are words that are that we need to get consistent, and I can pass that along.
I think
That's a really, really good comment, Matt, and so many good thoughts here. I wonder if in some of these cases it's options, right? So you say that, you know, a diversity and complexity of design needs to be achieved or something like that, and it through one or more of the following strategies, and then you break those out so that people are doing at least one thing, right? So maybe they're providing private outdoor space for each unit, or they're providing this or that. But I really like the idea of, and as I understand this, it's an as of right. So the strongly encouraged, you know, can give a sense and a flavor, and maybe that comes at some point in the document, but then separating out what are really the rules, right? And like, you know, is the only rule that you step up from the front of the site to the back? And is that something I don't see the huge advantage to that.
I think also to go back to Kathy's comment about the guidelines kind of really restricting the architectural intent or the architectural concept of mixed roof lines, dormers, gables are very traditional words. And I think to re-highlight what Kathy said, there's great architecture that could involve flat roofs. But then what I'm noticing is there's a bit of a conflict, because then there's human scale and then there's multi-story, but then there's breaking of the facade and kind of pulling back and chewing out. You get a lot more flexibility with someone who's thinking about mass and creating massing when you free themselves from the complexity of jamming a dormer inside of a void or an extrusion. So you have kind of I guess a historically moded term, but you're asking the designer to maybe untether themselves from that tradition, I guess. So I'm kind of, I think Kathy said it better than I, but it was almost like, don't restrict bad architecture, allow for good architecture, right? So I don't know that if some of these things might be doing that in a conflict of sorts, right? Incorporate architectural details that provide visual interest. That's very subjective. I think I would have a very different providing very different details than maybe Kathy would provide, right? Like just so fundamentally
so.
different. Yeah. So I think there's just some of the, I think re-highlighting that, let's see if we can help mitigate bad architecture and kind of, and bad massing. And so much of bad massing comes out of bad human scale, right? A negative response to human scale. It just comes out of jamming as many profitability units per acre as I can, but forgetting about human scale and that kind of streetscape and these other kind of factors of moving through the space.
I wonder if it makes sense, because you guys, this is you know, I'm a planner. I worked with other planners, and we're working with, you know, a volunteer planning and zoning commission to create these. And this is why your feedback is so, I just value it so much. Is there a way that I can send a Word document, especially of those design considerations, and somehow you mark it up?
We can definitely do that. I mean, I think it's more, you know, than that, because I think it's looking at what other, I mean, in the past, I've looked at design ordinances, it's been years ago, that have done that, but there's other approaches than this. I mean, this is a very prescriptive approach based on one vision of a building. But I mean, I think it'd be worth stepping back and seeing how else have people tried to accomplish this. And all the examples when we had the design meeting were of, fairly ordinary traditional approaches to design. And again, I don't have an objection to that. I just think it's like if we said, okay, going forward, we're only going to have traditional English food at restaurants and stores, right? No more Thai restaurants, no more, and that's not what we want to do, right?
It's also a bit of a generalization. I think that, and maybe even a misstep, but I'll say it anyways, that the type of developer that's looking at projects like this wants to proceed through the process as quickly as possible with as much profitability as possible, build them as cheaply as possible. And I think even Jennifer, in that meeting that I was with you a few months back, it's a 20-year project, right? It's how to pull the lever as hard as I can, squeeze as much money out as possible. So I think although design guidelines have the ability to restrict in a sense of kind of focusing the design, but it also has the ability to know inevitably that a developer might be just out of consequence doing something that we don't want in any built environment, not even apartments, multifamily, just in the use of natural materials. It's a waste of natural materials to build something that's going to last 20 years. So do we have the ability with guidelines to really impact them as changing the fundamentals of quality and kind of to the vision statement? It says high quality pedestrian scale, leveraging open space and incorporating diversity of housing types. I think those are really important, but how do these guidelines reinforce and kind of always go back to the vision statement that it's making sure that each one of these sections in design criteria or design guidelines really ties back to high quality pedestrian scale, leveraging open space and so forth. In other words, we know the inevitable outcome of a developer. How can we allow them to understand that a quality development is more valuable for everyone, right? A longer lasting thing is more valuable for everyone on multiple levels.
So that's a really interesting point. I was talking to on Friday, the city planner for Des Moines, Iowa, and they were saying that in their code, you can do painted chipboard as an exterior finish, right? That it's not limited. And so again, Jennifer points out correctly that we have to make sure in the legal structures in Connecticut, but I think materials can be specified, right? And so that might be a way to get at what you're talking about. Or there could be alternate paths. So maybe you can't, require something to be net zero or net zero ready or passive house like Eagleville Green is, but maybe that can be one pathway towards high quality construction.
Yeah. They feel almost at odds at times, right? So much of our industry, I think, it's a conflict of growth versus urbanism versus planning and slow design, right? All these different things that are kind of at odds with one another. I just want to bring up one more comment here that
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to leave too soon. So
I'll
if I cut out, you guys can keep going.
Yeah, I need to leave in a few minutes as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea, Jennifer, if you think that's easier to share the Word document that we can put some edit or modification on certain sections of the document, but at the same time, if there is any space where you can actually brainstorm for any high level kind of discussions, maybe, I don't know, maybe you can put that before you are talking specifically about the site design orientation and neighborhood. I mean, in terms of design consideration, maybe before you get into the specific subsections, maybe we can have some overall, section where we can brainstorm and see if we can forge any kind of verbiages that can almost serve as like a prerequisite, so that it is not like a icing on the cake. I just use this term a lot these days, but rather than that kind of a supplementary considerations, they might feel like a consideration as just suggested consideration, not really essential component that might make real changes on the way that they are developing. And so I really like to have the word like a diversity, because diversity and complexity of architectural design, but also in terms of landscaping field, diversity of plants and diversity of landscapes, diversity of materials, that really will shape the areas with more sense of a place that you highlight in here, and how we can make the sense of place that's that kind of concrete ways that they can think about will be, I think, important in my opinion. And also again, the natural sustainability, resilience, or even nature-based solutions in terms of landscaping that, I think we can have them think about in a more serious ways, because that will ultimately impact and influence on their aesthetics, and also in terms of functions, how all those sites will actually be functioning by the end of the day. So ultimately, we are doing this because we want to have really nice, great architecture in place, and also really good landscaping as well, right? We don't want to have them just to do whatever they normally do. Well, they might do it, they just get the money, but we as a town, we want to have a really good design in place here. So how we can improve the architecture and landscape architecture practices to a next level. I think this document need to serve on that purpose. So sorry, I do need to go right now, but yeah.
There's time, right? This public hearing stays open until at least July 15th. Should we reconvene? Should I send you this Word document and then we should reconvene, and then what's everyone's schedules? I mean, how much time do you need? And I'm going to be out of the country from June 25th to July 9th, but you can meet as long as it's a noticed meeting, and have like a work session. You don't need me as long as it's open, we're following FOI requirements. I can get a room for you. I don't know what works for folks.
Jennifer, just one quick question. Would it be worth putting this into a shared Google document so that everyone can see each other's comments in it, and we can kind of react to and kind of have these? So if everyone's familiar with Google Drive, Google Documents, that you have the suggestions, you have notes, and you can tag people. Is that something that you have the ability to share with everyone and create kind of a collaborative?
We definitely have that ability. Unfortunately, we're constrained by like this public meeting, and you can't have a meeting without. So I have to check with our from Freedom of Information. It's we're pretty constrained with that. So.
Oh, I didn't mean meeting. I meant what you said you were going to share, to have like a brainstorming, each of us to look at the notes and kind of go through this document. Is this document worth?
It's semantics, but that may be considered a meeting under the. So I would love to do that. I think it would be very productive. Let me see if I can do that. If not, might have to be like a work session.
So Jennifer, did your consultant share other approaches to design standards with you? Do you have other design standards that other communities are using and looked at?
You
Because
know, in Connecticut, you're really constrained by the village design districts. So I don't
I
know.
understand.
They didn't give, no, they didn't. The answer to that question is no.
yeah, because this is one approach, which is, different than I think we're all saying, we would like to see. And again, it really has I mean, there are ways in the more open language or alternatives that Sonia was mentioning, et cetera, that I think are more appropriate.
In terms of the process or the exact design considerations?
The exact design considerations.
Okay, so I think right now those, what do we have, like 5 sections on that? I mean, we can provide our consultant with, where to go back to kind of look at better design considerations. You can do like a high level set of comments. Or you can get really specific as how to improve this existing document.
Yeah, I mean, again, the approach that Sunyan was saying, like to say we want diversity and these are ways it could be achieved and you need to do it, to me is a much better approach than to say, the building should step back from the road, which, I don't see an advantage to that, right? What are we accomplishing by that?
Yeah, more like a principles that they need to follow.
Principles.
Right.
And under the principle, there's many ways that they can do with the
Yeah.
architect, with the planting and the landscapes and the amenities, right? So all things can actually leverage onto kind of converge into that kind of principle. You might have X number of principles. I mean, depending on the vision that you have, right?
Right.
Right. The word fencing versus visual disconnectivity or something, right? Like those are two. One is a product and is a very physical form, and one is a intent of breaking
Right.
visual connectivity.
Exactly. And as we said, if you want enclosure is what you're trying to get. A fence could do it, but a stone wall could do it. A shrubbery could do it. I mean, that's a very prescriptive solution. And we'll never know if we adopt something like that, what we missed, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll only know what you get, right? You don't know what you missed.
So I think this discussion, I mean, we have to decide which way to go. I mean, if we were to meet again, because I thought that maybe Google document, like Matthew suggested, might be helpful and productive. But if that's not allowed, then
Let me see if there's a way to do this. But I know all of you have to go, as do I, but where can we, where do you think we should go from here in terms of providing feedback? I guess I can check to see if a Google Doc is allowed with our governmental constraints.
Shared document is the next step. I only say that because everyone's on different schedules, and I thought that
I
might
know.
be the best way to kind of collaborate, separately collaborate, but see all of the information in one space.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, again, if I mean, you probably have constraints in your contract, but if you could ask your consultant for other approaches and documents we can look at, otherwise we can do that research and find it. I mean, I know there are other ones. I understand, or a little bit, I understand the village constraints and that you're working under those, but I think that still offers a lot of flexibility of what you're asking people to do. I think, if we had that and we could talk about a framework, it would be useful to have another conversation scheduled for us to all talk about what that framework looks like. I don't think editing the current document is useful. I think it's, I think we're talking about the design, a more global change to the design standards from everybody I hear talking.
So are you thinking like we would have different sections, like you're gonna start out with like sustainability, diversity, connections, transit. I don't know, that's something to do with landscaping. There'll be like natural resources. I don't know what that category is. Is that what you're sort of thinking about? Like
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what I hear people saying is, for instance, we want a greener site, right? You know, in green in the sense of, you know, physical plant material, biophilic, or, you know, whatever term we're going to use. And so I think, you know, you might say that, you know, there's a green shaded appearance or whatever like that. And some of that's in these standards, right? Like, you know, canopy trees in the parking area. But what if it's shaded by solar collectors, right? Instead, what if, you know, there's a, a very good provision for green between the sidewalk and the road, but what if instead you put those together and you have a broader green space usable by the resident in front of their home, right? What if, I mean, it seems like that there's a lot of ways to achieve better housing rather than these couple of things. And so this to me feels like a checklist, plus it's very constraining. In other words, I mean, you know, it's going to lead to apartment buildings with a entrance on the street, as you know, is what you're pushing to with a big peaked roof and the snow falling on the people, you know.
It's gonna lead to a mirror image of Four Corners. They're just gonna flip it, right? Buildings to the back, and like,
Right.
I think
And
what
it might
Kathy-
shade the people behind, you know, you might have you know, in a site, you might have a lovely little cul-de-sac behind that with this big building shading it over, which, you know, and that's, I mean, it does have to respond to the sites, right?
Yeah,
I
But
almost
you're right,
wonder
that's exactly what it would do. It would flip that around. Yeah.
I almost
And
wonder if like you're saying, the framework is kind of this kind of overlay of consistency across the document. And we just have that kind of that touch base that we consider that the framework is allowing us to use as a benchmark. But then where we kind of a little bit to your point, Kathy, but maybe in a way it got lost for a second. Maybe there is this kind of suggested design elements that we do want to see, that are, like you had said about a solar collector, we might actually want to see that on a project. So is that a direct suggestion as an option? And then you can use the framework as more of a suggestive, diverse tool, but you still have the options are always preferred one-to-one, right? It's just an easy, like, that is approved. That is something that we would want to see. So instead of creating guidelines that restrict things, we actually create options that become a checkbox. So we flip it a little bit. I wonder if that could be another tool inside of this that would be beneficial for someone who does want to hit a checkbox as they go down and say, I want to give 3 or 4 of these options that they asked for, the town asked for, the guidelines are asking for, that help kind of proceed them through the process, right?
yep.
I think what we have here is an administrative or a process that meets statutory and administrative procedures, but we need a little assistance with these design considerations. Is that what I'm hearing? Like, you like the
Yes.
process. It's the design considerations that is gonna, that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and a little bit of the introduction that shares some of the things that everybody's been saying about various approaches to design and not limiting to one vocabulary, etc.
Or
And
like
some
in
of
the
that's in the
purpose statement,
yeah,
you're saying? Like
right, yeah, and some of that is in the design guidelines, but again, the visual images there don't back it up, right?
we don't have visual images in this document.
Well, no, in the design, in your other design guide,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to stay focused on this document right now.
No, I know, but I'm
Yeah,
trying
and
to,
then
they all
then
fit
we go-
together, right?
Yeah, and then we go next to the design guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Jennifer,
yeah.
a great kind of thing that I'm seeing right now is number 5 A on 10, 11, 12. So
Wait,
taller buildings, multi-story buildings, design should incorporate a modulation of an articulation to break up larger buildings, and then gradual setback of development so that taller buildings are further from the road. So those things all have to do with sight lines, shadow lines, massing, as opposed to large elements should be behind, graduated should be like this. So you're talking more about the a massing study in within the site context, very specific to the site, as opposed to saying a taller building should be broken up and it should be moved back, but it can be forward if it's articulated. So there's kind of, in other words, there's restrictions there that I think creative wise, as a creative person, I don't know how I would follow the prescriptive pathway forward as opposed to developing something more specific to the site in relationship to what the primary road is, what the massing is, what the shadow lines are, and such. So I think those 3, 10, 11, 12 inside of 5A are kind of almost, they're conflicting with each other in a way, right? They're saying it can be larger and taller, it should be to the back, but we want it articulated. It just feels a lot of like, there's a lot of things happening, I guess, that aren't necessarily open to the creative process, I guess.
Okay, so I think let me just kind of summarize a little bit here and then we can move on. All right, I'm gonna see if we could do that Google Doc. I think that would be the most productive, but I don't know that we can. And if I will, I think looking at these pages where we've got these design considerations, if I could get you guys to look at these 3 pages and just give me some comments. So let me see if we can do a Google Doc. If not, maybe you all could work on this individually and then we could have another meeting. Would that work?
Yeah.
Okay. And I will just have Sandy do like a doodle poll again with schedules because I know that's challenging.
Yeah, I think it's challenging, and it's more challenging to do it sooner, but I think this is going to be a lot of iteration, so the sooner the better. But good to have the conversation, good agreement, and I think it's interesting how much we all see those structure as needing to change.
Yeah, well, you guys are taking these and then you're figuring out how to design it. I'm looking at process.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. So, and it's great. It's good to have all of these different perspectives, right? But in the end, someone's got to take this and design something, and then we have
Right,
to.
right.
Mhm.
And other design considerations have a series of axonometrics showing the site and what that does to the shape of the buildings. And I think, we're all sitting here knowing what you're going to get out of this, right? And I don't know if you've tried to apply them to other. I mean, it'd be good to look at some really spectacular design and see if you could build it with these regulations, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, the place to start is what you want, right?
Mhm.
Or from a designer's perspective, and I appreciate all the planning perspectives. It has to be legal,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
it's very interdisciplinary what we do, right? Yeah.
Right. But yeah, and so I think, you want to test it against, and, I'm seeing that trying to work in the Hartford plan regulations that they adopted now. I mean, everything was done for a reason, but when you actually try to go build something within those, you're not necessarily getting, because everybody pictured one project that they would design and they want,
Mhm.
but that doesn't fit on every site. It isn't appropriate in every context.
I've heard a lot about that code. I mean, it's hard.
Oh God, it's driving me nuts.
Yeah, right. I know. I've heard it's, very well intentioned very
Oh,
state of the art at the time from a zoning perspective. Yeah, but, all right.
No, yeah, yes.
Let me figure something out and then we'll touch base. And I do appreciate all of your time. If we could do the Google Doc, I would be, I think that would make everyone's lives a lot easier, but I have to work within the constraints that I'm
Yeah,
allowed. So,
understood.
yeah. So, all right, let me get back to you. Thank you again. And this will be, one step at a time.
And thank you for listening to us and being open. I really appreciate
Oh,
it. I know it's not
I
easy.
could talk about this stuff all day. It's just getting it on paper and
It's hard.
making it so,
Yeah.
it's translatable. Yeah, so, but thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.